For a brief period in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Steven Seagal, a black belt in Aikido and B-movie star, seemed poised to join the ranks of action heroes like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. His 1988 debut in Above the Law was promising, and Under Siege in 1992 was a solid action film. However, Seagal did more to ridicule himself than to be taken seriously as an actor. You don't need to watch his movies to understand why. Your time might be better spent here. This is the story of the rise and fall of Steven Seagal's acting career. The 1980s saw a boom in B-movie action stars who blew up warehouses full of bad guys with lousy aim. As Hollywood Insider describes it, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone were the most notable names, but Jean-Claude Van Damme and Chuck Norris were also in the race. In 1988, a new name joined that group, Steven Seagal, who starred in and co-wrote the police thriller Above the Law via IMDb. The story follows Nico Toscani, played by Seagal, a former CIA operative who uses his martial arts skills to help Chicago cops dismantle a heavily armed drug ring. The film wasn't a critical success. Rotten Tomatoes gives it a 50% rating based on 20 reviews, but it remains one of Seagal's best-known works. More importantly, it launched his career, establishing him as a rugged, no-nonsense actor. Roger Ebert gave the film 3 stars, praising Seagal, noting, "He has a strong and particular screen presence. It's obvious he does many of his own stunts, and some of the fight scenes are impressive and authentic. He's not just a pretty face either. He can play tender and he can play smart, qualities often absent in Charles Bronson or Stallone films." The success of Above the Law puts Seagal on the map. But that success came in 1988, just as the B-action movie genre was beginning to fade. By the time he peaked in the early 90s, the craze was dying down, as the New York Times described. However, he still had one major hit, Under Siege, 1992, with a star-studded cast. Seagal played Casey Ryback, a Navy SEAL-turned-chef who thwarts a terrorist plot and an internal conspiracy. The hijacking of the USS Missouri by the villains goes well, until they realize Ryback is silently eliminating their accomplices, leading to an epic final showdown. Roger Ebert, in his 3-star review, called it Die Hard on a Battleship. Seagal's decline began when Warner Bros. Chose not to renew his contract after a 4-film deal. Since then, Seagal has starred in dozens of mainly direct-to-video action films, most of which went unnoticed. Titles like Half Past Dead, Out for a Kill, Mercenary for Justice, and Force of Execution are just a few of his many releases, with the most recent being Beyond the Law in 2019. These films are known for their generic titles and share the common trait of very low scores on Rotten Tomatoes, many well below 50%, with several earning a dismal 0%. Curiously, Seagal had a chance at a mainstream comeback with Sylvester Stallone's The Expendables franchise. Stallone himself confirmed that discussions were underway when he tweeted, "Just talk to Steven S. in Moss EX3 if part." However, Seagal never appeared in the movie, later stating to The Big Issue, "I just didn't like some of the people involved." He didn't name names, but it's notable that one of the Expendables producers, Avi Lerner, sued Seagal for $14 million in 2005. The lawsuit claimed that Seagal's chronic tardiness, insistence on rewriting scenes, and allowing his entourage to interfere with filming had caused major production delays. Like many action stars, Steven Seagal decided to try his hand at music. While some actors are quite talented musicians, like Jeff Bridges or even Johnny Depp, Seagal's foray into music left critics scratching their heads. In 2005, he released his debut album Songs from the Crystal Cave, followed by Mojo Priest in 2006. His music is a blend of blues, world music, and soft rock, with Seagal singing and playing guitar. He even managed to feature artists like Stevie Wonder and Lady Saw on his first album. However, critics were not impressed. The Guardian described his debut as a strange mixture of Eastern philosophy, musical mediocrity, and martial arts machismo. And Entertainment Weekly wrote, "Steven Seagal's music is about as subtle as his movies, and just as unintentionally hilarious." Despite the poor reception, Seagal toured with his band, Thunderbox, and performed in several countries, including France and the UK. But the tour didn't draw big crowds, and it became clear that his music career wasn't going to take off. If releasing music wasn't unexpected enough, in 2005, Seagal launched his own energy drink, called Steven Seagal's Lightning Bolt. Marketed as the first all-natural energy drink, it was advertised as being packed with rare ingredients from Tibet and the Amazon, like goji berries and Asian cordyceps mushrooms. The drink came in flavors such as Cherry Charge and Asian Experience, and it carried slogans like, "A natural energy drink with high-performance taste." The branding leaned heavily on Seagal's martial arts image. However, the drink was pulled from shelves within a few years, and its failure became a recurring joke on internet forums. Cracked called it a caffeinated bottle of lies, and it even inspired parody reviews on YouTube, mocking its taste and packaging. Then came the book deal. In 2016, Seagal published The Way of the Shadow Wolves, The Deep State and the Hijacking of America, co-written with Tom Morrissey. A mix of political thriller and conspiracy theory, the book follows a Native American tribal police officer as he uncovers a globalist plot involving human trafficking, drug smuggling, and terrorism, all allegedly covered up by the so-called Deep State. The book was promoted with a foreword by Joe Arpaio, the controversial former sheriff of Arizona. Reviews were overwhelmingly negative. Critics called the writing unreadable, amateurish, and paranoid. Vice ran a brutal takedown of the book, noting its bizarre dialogue, clunky narrative, and far-right ideology. One Amazon reviewer wrote, "Reading this book is like watching a slow-motion car crash, painful, but you can't look away." The controversies didn't stop at failed products and bad books. Over the years, Seagal has been accused of sexual misconduct by multiple women. Among the earliest were Ren Malone, Nicole Selinger, and Christine Keeve, who worked on his film On Deadly Ground. They told Los Angeles Times that Seagal made inappropriate advances and created a toxic environment on set. In 2017, actress Portia de Rossi claimed that Seagal exposed himself during an audition. Later, Jenny McCarthy said Seagal had asked her to undress during a casting session for Under Siege 2, though Seagal has denied the allegations. In 2018, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office reviewed a sexual assault case involving Seagal, but ultimately declined to file charges due to the statute of limitations. Seagal has also cultivated relationships with controversial world leaders. Most notably, he developed a close friendship with Russian President Vladimir Putin, calling him one of the great living world leaders. In 2016, Seagal was granted Russian citizenship, and in 2018, he was named a special envoy by the Russian Foreign Ministry, tasked with improving U.S.-Russia humanitarian ties. His close ties to the Kremlin drew criticism, especially during times of heightened tensions between the U.S. and Russia. And in 2023, he received Russia's Order of Friendship, a state honor awarded by Putin himself, which reignited controversy in the West and led to calls for Seagal to be investigated for potentially violating sanctions. In recent years, Steven Seagal's life has shifted dramatically, from action star to geopolitical oddity. While his film career has dwindled, his presence on the international stage has grown increasingly complex, strange, and polarizing. The man once known for breaking bones on screen has been making headlines not for blockbusters, but for his bold political alignments, unlikely friendships, and a collection of citizenships that reads more like a James Bond dossier than a Hollywood resume. As of today, Seagal officially holds 3 nationalities. American, by birth. Serbian, granted in early 2016. Russian, also awarded later in 2016. Each of these was earned, or granted, under unique circumstances, and each reflects a new chapter in his curious transformation. His Serbian citizenship came after a series of visits in which Seagal voiced deep admiration for Serbian culture, history, and political leadership. He praised Serbian martial traditions and offered to establish an Aikido dojo in Belgrade, with the intention of spreading martial arts and spiritual discipline among Serbian youth. The government embraced his gestures. They saw Seagal as a cultural ally and even a tool of soft power, a global celebrity who could promote Serbia's image abroad. In return, the Serbian government granted him citizenship, citing his special merits in promoting Serbia and the Serbian people internationally. But this move paled in comparison to the media frenzy that followed his Russian naturalization just months later. In November 2016, Vladimir Putin personally signed the decree granting Seagal Russian citizenship. A few days later, the two met in Moscow, and in a carefully staged television moment, Putin handed Seagal his new Russian passport. Seagal bowed and shook his hand solemnly, describing the moment as one of the proudest days of my life. This ceremony wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Russia was increasingly isolating itself from the West, and Seagal's embrace of the Kremlin narrative made him a perfect mouthpiece for pro-Russian sentiments in the West. Seagal quickly became a regular guest on Russian state media, where he appeared on talk shows and documentaries, often to discuss American decline, the virtues of Russian martial arts, and the spiritual strength of Putin's leadership. He defended the annexation of Crimea, calling it completely reasonable, and criticized NATO's presence near Russia's borders, claiming the West had been bullying Russia for decades. In 2018, Seagal was appointed Russia's special envoy for humanitarian ties with the United States, a symbolic diplomatic role created specifically for him. The Russian Foreign Ministry explained that Seagal would be responsible for improving U.S.-Russia relations through cultural and civil diplomacy, though most critics dismissed it as political theater. But things escalated in 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. Seagal did not shy away from the controversy. On the contrary, he leaned in. In multiple interviews, he blamed the Ukrainian government and NATO for the conflict, echoing Kremlin talking points almost verbatim. That same year, he visited the Donbass region, where he was filmed touring the ruins of a prison that Russia claimed had been bombed by Ukrainian forces. In a now infamous segment aired on Russian TV, Seagal accused Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky of sacrificing his own people and called the war a Western provocation. Western governments, human rights organizations, and media outlets were outraged. Critics accused Seagal of acting as a de facto Kremlin propagandist, using his fading celebrity status to legitimize one of the most internationally condemned military actions in decades. Despite this backlash, Seagal doubled down. In March 2023, he accepted the Order of Friendship, a high civilian honor in Russia, from Putin himself during a formal ceremony in Moscow. Russian state TV broadcast the event extensively. Seagal, wearing a black tunic with Buddhist beads, delivered a short speech praising Russia as a beacon of hope in a dark world. Western analysts and journalists widely mocked the ceremony, with one outlet calling it a surreal act of propaganda theater, and others labeling Seagal Putin's pet actor. Back in the United States, Seagal's public image has taken a similar turn, albeit from a different angle. In the last decade, he's appeared at multiple far-right events, given speeches at QAnon-adjacent gatherings, and posted cryptic online messages supporting conspiracy theories about the deep state and voter fraud. He has voiced admiration for Donald Trump, aligned himself with anti-establishment rhetoric, and suggested that Hollywood is controlled by evil global forces. His fringe opinions, combined with his unwavering support for Russia, have alienated him from most mainstream institutions in the U.S., both political and entertainment-related. Today, Seagal lives primarily between Moscow and Dubai, occasionally traveling to Serbia. He claims to be involved in cultural diplomacy and martial arts instruction, but the details are vague. His film output has nearly dried up. His last few movies, released between 2016 and 2019, were low-budget action flicks shot in Eastern Europe. Critics noted that Seagal often barely moved in these films, letting stunt doubles handle the action while he delivered mumbled lines in short, edited bursts. In interviews, he often speaks of future projects, a movie about samurais, a spiritual documentary, a biopic on Aikido, but none of these have materialized. His social media remains minimal, with most updates centered on his martial arts seminars, Buddhist practices, or pro-Russian statements. All of this has turned Seagal into a kind of geopolitical outlier, a former Hollywood star who now seems more comfortable in the company of autocrats than actors, more eager to attend military ceremonies than movie premieres. Whether this represents a sincere transformation, a cynical pivot, or a descent into irrelevance masked by spectacle, one thing is certain: Steven Seagal's path from action hero to international political oddity is unlike anything Hollywood has ever seen.